All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Roney. Happy Tuesday. And I want to introduce our special guest here, Miss Danielle Palmer.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So tonight's episode is going to be on frequency, right?
Yeah.
Kind of scalar energy. And so I'm not sure if you were on maybe a few months back where we had Dr. Tennant on. And Dr. Tennant really, I think personally, you've heard me say it blew me away a little bit with some of the research and the information on the cell and the voltage of the cell and how everything's energy, right? So just really pointed out heavily that the cell needs a certain voltage, which is
25 millivolts.
25 millivolts in order to stay healthy, right? And function at an optimal level.
Just to operate.
Just
25 millivolts, yeah.
And what about to heal?
50
millivolts, right? Okay, so real quick, just to kind of set the tone here. What are you typically seeing on average with patients that are coming in with a chronic disease like cancer?
10.96 even. We've had somebody that was down even lower than 6. And then we've had some that have been pretty decent, up in the 18 range, but definitely a lot
on the low
lower.
end.
Yeah.
Now, just to preface it, as I've done my research, when the cell is oxidatively stressed, right? Which means there's inflammation, there's free radicals, and then that cell just starts to get quite a bit of damage.
Yeah.
They use the term oxidative stress. So when that happens, we start to get a cell that doesn't use as much respiration and it becomes more anaerobic, right? Which means it uses less oxygen. It becomes more acidic because anytime a cell's using less oxygen, it's creating lactic acid instead of some other things it's supposed to create under respiration. The voltage, in my opinion, I'm not sure chicken or the egg, right?
It's kind of the same.
Right?
Yeah, because alkalinity, essentially. So the acidic, that's the same thing. It's just in a liquid form.
I gotcha. So, versus the voltage form, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So the point I was trying to kind of get to, that I'm trying to rationalize as well. Okay, what happens? And then do these things happen and then the voltage decreases? And then we have 3 things to work through. We have a low oxygen state, we have a high acidity state, and we have a low voltage state.
And there are a lot of that. It's all one problem. So we're gonna
dive into that.
We're gonna do a deep dive today.
Perfect. The other part that I talk about now, and I include in that cellular, I guess, degenerative process, if you will, or damage process, is that the nutrient levels become decreased. So whether it's the NutriVal or SpectraCells, another test that looks at the nutrient levels, we're actually going to do a new test coming up that gives us information on the cellular nutrient level within, I believe, like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So cool stuff going on that we're able to look at from a cellular standpoint. And I'll set the table a little bit. If that cell, low oxygen, high acidity, low nutritional content, and then also low voltage, that sets the stage for a chronic disease like cancer, because the DNA and the genomes of that cell become damaged. And what they're supposed to do is take a damaged cell through what they call apoptosis or cell death, right? If they're damaged and all those things are occurring, that won't happen well. And those damaged cells that are supposed to die replicate. Fair?
Yeah.
All right. So the way I'm sharing the way I like to think through it, which is, okay, let's make sure we're addressing the cell.
Yeah.
So in our clinic, it's oxygen, alkaline, immune boosting, increased voltage, and get that, and of course get the nutrition levels back up to par, so that cell can really be vibrant and healthy and replicate properly, right? And heal properly faster than that breaks down. Now above that, we look at the antioxidants or the free radicals, which are atoms that lose paired electrons. And when you have enough free radicals, that's when the damage at the cell takes place. Now, above that, inflammation, right? So a lot of this is inflammatory based.
Inflammation is a huge role.
Huge role.
And there's something that comes underneath that,
which is
the voltage of the cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all plays a factor. Now, so if we go cell and what happens to the cell, free radicals above it that damage the cell, inflammation that creates the free radicals and more damage to the cell, then we look at causes. Gets into Okay, what's driving the inflammation? Bacterial infections, viral, parasitic, fungal infections like yeast or mold, with toxins, chemicals, heavy metals. All of those things play a factor in why we get inflammation and oxidative stress, free radicals, and stress and damage to the cell. So we're not only working at the cellular level, we're working backwards and controlling the free radicals and the inflammation, and of course the causes. That's when I think plan-wise, you start to get a very efficient, very detailed plan that kind of leaves not many rocks unturned.
Yeah,
Fair?
absolutely.
So, excuse me. Sorry, gang. So I wanted to paint that picture as far as, when we're looking at strategy and we're looking at plans, the more information we can gather, the better we're going to be, right? And you hear me say it a lot if you've been on here. I'm a very analytical, plan-based person that I felt like as I've learned this in sports and so forth, if the plan is researched, well thought of, right, and very detailed, and then you work the details of it, the downside is mitigated significantly. And the upside is, generally speaking, much higher. That's all we can ask for.
Yeah.
In this situation here, when there's a diagnosis like cancer, we just want to throw everything at it, I dotted, T's crossed, but come from a standpoint of education or information standpoint, I should say. And when we do that, and we're upstairs, by the way, and the clinic's downstairs, but the eyeball test tells us that this works really, really well. And that's including if you had to use some conventional treatment as well, as long as you're doing that, plus the oxygen and the alkalizing and the immune boosting and increasing the voltage and getting rid of the inflammation and addressing causes. That's when the layering process, in my opinion, that's when things work really well. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely.
So the cancer conversation is designed to give you that plan and give you the details of that plan. And I was watching a video, and I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit, but I think there's a point. I was watching a video, and it was a doctor-patient interaction with cancer. And he basically asked the patient how much for the diagnosis. And the patient was actually a little bit offended. She said, I had no, I didn't know. I'm not saying the blame. He said, I want to ask you about responsibility. Once that diagnosis is made, what he was asking her is what he was asking, right? And do it in the initially, but she said 100%. So her conversation for this is that's exactly what we're trying to do. Focus plan, and then keep teaching the details of the plan so you have the responsibility, right? And in the conventional world, my opinion, right? I'll give you my opinion. If I get diagnosed, I have zero control, right? I'm going to the doctor, I'm listening at chemotherapy, radiation. Where's the control for me, right? As an example, or a place like this where you're getting taught how you can be active in the plan and what from a learning that you can start controlling and have responsibility. So that I saw that over the weekend, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly why we do what we do, because it empowers you. And when you have empower via information, you have more control. So that's the idea. So share that story as we get into this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand it over to Miss Danielle Palmer because, yes, what do we have?
Well, just before we get going, I'm seeing a lot of comments saying that we're breaking up and freezing, and it's many people commenting about the sound and also the video.
All right. Shep, anything? Hang on, gang. We'll see what we can do about that. Sorry, guys.
I was watching all these comments come in, so. Sorry, everybody. Technical issues.
We'll see if we can work on it here for you.
I just started seeing a lot of those, but I want to make sure everybody can hear what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh. Yeah, it was good stuff too.
Yeah, man, jeez, you're gonna have to repeat everything that you just said.
Man, I can't. That's gonna be hard. I can't do it on the spot like that. I have to just riff. Just want to hear
Seems
it
so
all.
interesting.
Yeah.
They want to hear it. Hi.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. So Shep, anything immediate, or do we just keep rolling? Sorry, gang.
internet thing.
Okay. All right. So listen, it may be word for word. All right, Tom, I got you.
Ready,
All right.
go.
So real quick, the whole idea was the responsibility from the doctor, just the doctor, to the patient. And we do that by education, and we do that by empowering through information and education. And then the control is not just like conventionally, it's just the doctor. We want the control to be in your hands. And so you have more of what is an uncontrollable sometimes situation and diagnosis, or it feels that way, that we shift that power to you via the education process. So
Definitely.
I think that's super important. I think for me, it is super important. I feel like now with my family history, my history, I feel like I've got answers. And I feel like the control is back in my hands based on what I've learned, even being here. So I hope that helps you too, because the idea when you come here is you want to come here and just heal and not worry about have to quarterbacking your care and have to be, I know a lot of you Google and you read all this stuff and I don't know how to put all this together. Well, the plan is the key. And I think that's why a lot of people come here, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then educating each step of that process is also a big part of it as well. It's not just the tools in the toolbox and the experience of the doctors. It's actually a very, very solid plan that's articulated, hopefully in the cancer conversations and on a day-to-day basis by our fantastic clinicians like Danielle. So without further ado, I want to pull up the slideshow. And Danielle's going to go through a lot on the frequencies,
Yes.
give you a little tutorial that way, and then talk about we have mead now. We have a lot of frequency type of modalities and testing. And I think Danielle's going to cover some of those to give you an idea of how we can not only chemical labs like blood and urine and saliva and things like that, but the energy and the frequency part of it, which again, when you're looking at the totality of care, we don't want to leave anything out.
No.
Why would you? When the research is that strong, we want every aspect of testing that's going to give us a better roadmap for success. Fair?
Definitely.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that's better, y'all. All right. let me go ahead and share.
And while he's getting that rolling, I just want to thank you for having me on. And today I'm really excited for us to talk about this topic. And the reason being is because I've been in this field for 14 years, and I can tell you from the time that I started to now, there is a huge, huge difference in people understanding, because when I first started, everybody was like, oh, this is woo-woo.
Yeah,
They didn't understand it.
No,
right?
for sure.
And now I feel like frequency is really starting to be more talked about, and kind of a little bit more in the mainstream. So and it's so important. And I want you to understand why this is so important. And it's not just, this modality or that modality, understanding how it affects us as a whole. And you're going to see how important this is to understand and to look at. So.
All right. So I'll skip I'll let you give a little background. They know my background. So they know, they hear me enough. So I'll skip that. I'll save you. Go ahead.
Oh, don't save us.
Yeah.
No, but yeah. So like I said, I've been doing frequency medicine for 14 years. I started with skin-R therapy, which is a device out of Russia. It basically mimics the nervous system of the body, and that was kind of the first thing that drew me into frequency medicine. And from there, I've studied, from, Dr. Carolyn McMakin, Dr. Jerry Tennant, I've read tons of books, kind of delved in and really did a deep dive on all this. And I think it's just something innate that is just such a foundation of what we are, that this has to be looked at.
Right.
And I've just become, the more that I've learned, I've become more and more passionate about this, and just seeing the difference that this makes with our patients. That's why we do this. That's why I'm so passionate about this. And that's why I've done all the training that I've done and continue to do.
Yeah. So, and when a diagnosis like this comes up, you don't want to leave any rock unturned.
No.
Right. And when you learn this, it's like, okay, this is a big deal. The cell has energy. If the energy of the cell is not adequate, that's as simple as it gets. It's going to have a hard time healing.
Yeah.
And they've proven that.
Absolutely.
Fair? Okay.
Exactly.
So, okay. All right. So, go
All
ahead.
right.
I'll let you roll.
So first off, so I just want to just briefly go over, so what is frequency? Because we hear this term all the time, but most people I have no idea what it means, right? So frequency is measured in hertz. So basically what hertz means is essentially one wave in a period of time, right? So one wave, 1 second would be 1 hertz. So if there's 2.5 waves, in this example, 2.5 waves in 1 second, that's 2.5 hertz. So just a brief understanding. So you understand the difference between, let's say, a very popular number that will come up momentarily, 7.83 hertz versus, let's say, 2.5 million.
Right.
Very big difference.
Right. So that right there is always based on 1 second.
So this is, yes. Yeah. So
good.
Unit of time. Yeah. So hertz, 1 second.
Okay. So 2.5, you're getting big.
Yeah.
Crests.
You get space. Yeah. Space between.
But if there's a million, it is right?
Yeah.
Fair. Okay.
And when you get to
that's how my brain works. I figured I'd share.
Yeah. And then also we're going to be talking about electromagnetic fields. So I just want you to kind of get a brief understanding that those are basically measured in microtesla, right? And so, Tesla, it's so you have 1 million microtesla in 1 Tesla, and that's just what these devices are measured in. So you'll hear things like, 3.5 microtesla, and things like that. That's what that means. It's just their common measurement. Okay.
They're apples to apples kind of comparison.
Exactly.
Okay.
So why is all this so important? Okay. So the Earth that we live on has its own frequency. And this was actually discovered, so back in 1951, Professor Schumann, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, the Schumann resonance. So he actually did these experiments and he calculated the tension between the Earth and the ionosphere and found that the Earth's frequency was approximately 10 hertz, right? So that was kind of a big deal. Like, wow, okay, we calculated the Earth's natural frequency and it's alive. It has an energy. So 10 hertz, that kind of stayed there like that for a while. And I know some of you are probably asking right now, well, what about 7.83 hertz? Because that is the Schumann resonance, for those of you who know. Well, that didn't come till later. So basically, this other gentleman, Hans Berger, was doing all these experiments. He was the creator of the EEG. And he found that alpha waves essentially were an exact match to the Schumann resonance of the Earth. So our alpha waves,
which is 10.
Yeah. So yeah. It was a match, okay. Right? So when these two actually merged, and decided, okay, wait, we need to look at this and we really need to figure this out because our brain is doing the exact same thing as the Earth. And we know alpha waves are incredibly important, right? And so once they saw that, they decided, okay, we really need to figure this out. And that's where the 7.83 hertz came from, right? They calculated the exact frequency, and the exact frequency between the two was 7.83 hertz. So the Earth and us, very much interrelated. Okay. So how does this affect the body? Well, back in 1966, they did an experiment. They call it the bunker experiment. But basically at the Max Planck Institute, they put volunteer students down into a bunker. And in this bunker, the Earth's natural frequency of 7.83 hertz would not be present. And all these students started experiencing mental, physical, and emotional, psychological side effects pretty quickly. And what they did was they would use a frequency generator and they would put in frequency. And the only frequency that did anything was 7.83 hertz, and it would alleviate their symptoms. So just that little bit of a difference affects us so greatly. So what is our world doing today?
So this may be something you can't answer, but why in the bunker was it not at 7.83? Because
so the Schumann resonance is calculated from the Earth to the ionosphere and that tension between the two. So technically in a bunker, you're not in that space, right, between the two. Fair. So you're lower. Okay. Yeah. So you're not getting that resonance.
You got it. Okay.
So we can already see that this has a huge role in our health, right? Just our brain. So this went on. So Luc Montagnier, if you haven't heard of him, he's a Nobel Prize winning scientist. And he was doing some water experiments back in 2011. And just if you don't know, he's incredibly famous for discovering the HIV virus.
Oh,
so he's
okay.
a very big
Big
scientist.
deal.
Yeah. So he was doing some water experiments and, seeing memory of water and all these things. And so he actually found that DNA, our DNA, communicates via frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he would do is he would put, even in 2 different test tubes, strand of frequency, and they would communicate back and forth to each other. So one of the foundations of science is that life cannot be created where there is not life already, right? So what he did was actually quite extraordinary, because he took unorganized nucleotides, which are the building blocks of DNA, and when he applied 7.83 hertz, they formed structured DNA. Wow. Which is miraculous, right?
So 7.83, pretty important.
So
right? If you don't know anything yet,
7.83 hertz, very important. Yeah. So my point that I'm trying to drive in is that frequency is at the very core of what we are. We don't exist without it. Our DNA is frequency, right? And actually, if you broke down the tiniest little particles and everything in the universe, all these little particles, atoms, neutrons, protons, they all break down to wave shapes. So everything is frequency, but you can see how much frequency affects us, right? Another reason, something that people commonly don't know, is that we have a thing called cryptochrome cells. And cryptochrome cells have been studied and found to be electromagnetically sensitive. So this is very, very common. And, birds and insects and all these other creatures on the planet, they all have cryptochrome cells. Robins, actually, they've done studies where they have a ton in their eyes. So it's almost like they have a heads up display of the Earth's magnetic field. And that's how they, can actually navigate. Yeah. But humans actually do have cryptochrome cells. And fruit flies naturally are not electromagnetically sensitive. But when they put human cryptochrome cells into them, they become sensitive. So that just shows you we are very much affected by electromagnetic frequency.
Energy.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Gotcha. So if you feel like this right now, it's totally okay. I'm gonna pull it back around, okay? But the whole point is that our very DNA, our brains, our health, everything cellular is tied to frequency. Okay. All right. So today, in the 1980s, only 3% of people used cell phones, let's say, right? Because our technology has changed so much. But now nearly all of us have a cell phone, right? Using one right here. I have one in my pocket. They're all over the place. There's no getting rid of them. But the current adolescent population, by the time, today they reach 19 years old, they're going to be using a cell phone for 10 years. And all this other frequency and everything that's going on, we don't know the effects of that yet. Right. However, we can kind of, knowing what we do know with, DNA and the alpha waves and all these things, there's definitely an effect there. Okay?
So I'll touch on that real quick, because we'll do a separate episode. When they talk about EMFs and electromagnetic fields, there's ionizing and non-ionizing radiation, not to get too off track. But the ionizing are the ones that they say are studied heavily to create damage to the DNA. X-rays, nuclear waves, things like that, right? The heavy duty stuff. The in the literature, your Wi-Fi networks and things like that have done their studies that say that it doesn't affect the DNA. But what you read, and the more you research, is the non-ionizing radiation from electronics, from cell towers, from cell phones, from computers, from all that. It's the amount today that we're getting, that they're finding the over inundation is still creating damage to the DNA, just like those waves, those ionizing waves are. So just wanted to point that out. We'll do a separate class on that, but EMFs, huge deal as it relates to the damage to the cell and the energy. So go ahead, sorry.
And I just want to point out, even so the WHO even stated, you can see the statement down here at the bottom of the page, that they've classified this as a class 2B carcinogenic, or carcinogen.
Mhm.
So they're recognizing it.
No, absolutely.
You know?
And increased risk for gliomas. So the gliomas or glioblastomas
Mhm.
are some of the most aggressive types of brain cancer that we're seeing the rise in as well. So again, just pointing that out. So, and you'll talk about making your environment a little bit safer too is probably on here. I'm
Yep,
pretty sure. So,
absolutely.
all right, good.
All right.
Yep.
So what can we do to fix all this?
Mhm.
So yeah, number one, clean up your environment, right? So let's go to next slide real quick.
Mhm.
So cleaning up your environment. So we have tons of electrosmog around us. If you were able to hear all of the frequencies around you right now, you would go absolutely nuts. Okay, because there's natural frequencies and then there's unnatural frequencies. And everything that's being emitted right now, I mean, they did experiments with bees and they put, the telephones that we used to have in the house that had the dock, right?
Mhm.
And the first time we could walk away without having to be stuck to the cord. So they actually put those in beehives, and the whole colony would just disperse and never come back.
Wow.
Because they affected them so much. But what do? We sit here and we put phones up to our ears. We have, Bluetooth in our ears, which is about 2.5 million hertz, by the way, Bluetooth. 5G is about 3.5 on average. So big difference,
yeah.
big difference. But yeah, so your electrosmog, it's around you everywhere. So I think it's just being conscious of that this is an issue, this is a problem. What can I do to mitigate it? Right. And that is doing things like I use like air tubes instead of the Bluetooth, turning your phone off at night. Because the thing is your melatonin production, the brain doesn't decipher between light and these types of waves. So if your cell phone is on, if your Wi-Fi is on, if you have technology on, your brain thinks it's daytime, and that disrupts the melatonin function. And melatonin, as we know, huge antioxidant. So your body's trying to heal. It's releasing all these, free radicals because that's just a process of healing, right?
That's part of the sleep cycle.
Yeah, part of the sleep cycle. Yeah. And then melatonin is supposed to come and sweep up all these free radicals. But if your brain thinks that it's daytime and it's not producing melatonin like it's supposed to, and they've done this in tons of studies where literally just your phone or Wi-Fi, it shuts off that production. Well, then you have all these free radicals in your body. So cleaning up your environment, incredibly, incredibly important. Melatonin is actually 5 times more of a antioxidant than vitamin C, 2 times more than vitamin E. And like this says, your body loses 500 million cells each day. So producing healthy cells, pretty important.
Yeah. Agreed. And again, we'll go over when we do our EMF class and course, we'll go over more strategies to protect yourself, to maybe more hardwiring the home, things like that. We'll talk about those strategies.
Yeah. So at our clinic, we're doing some things to bring in technologies that can actually correct a lot of these problems. So I think one of the big things to understand is not only are we affected by all these frequencies, right? But also we're kind of like a giant circuit board, okay? And the work of Dr. Jerry Tennant, you can see, so basically we have these sets of muscles that power a specific circuit. And that circuit provides power for different structures. Let's say your eyes, your ears, your, things that don't have their own power supply. They're not muscles, right? So what happens when a circuit loses power? Well, your voltage drops, your oxygen level drops, because the cellular membrane voltage, right, that controls that thickness of the cell wall. Oxygen, nutrients, all these things can't get into the cell, but also the bad things can't get out of the cell. So then you have inflammation, you have all these things start happening. And when oxygen drops in the body, you get fungus, mold, and parasites turned on.
So that cell membrane, which is permeable, should be permeable,
yes,
is affected. It's no longer as permeable. So the good stuff can't get in and the bad stuff can't get out. Fair?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair. Okay.
So his whole concept, and if you missed the talk that he did, if it's still there, please try to go back and rewatch it.
Great one. Yeah.
Yeah. And if not, He's got some lectures up on YouTube and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But he's been researching this for the last, gosh, over 25 years now, I
At
believe.
least, yeah.
Yeah. And we're doing this test in our clinic, and we can see every time it tells a story.
Yeah.
You know, it's, oh, wow, when you were 5, you fell, boom, you hit your head, that, you know, affected the gallbladder circuit. And then this happened, and then that happened. And then, oh, wow, look, all of your issues are along the circuit, which you had, let's say, a cap put on when you were 17, you know, and you've just been leaking electrons, and that voltage drops in that circuit. And then all those, you know, structures become susceptible.
So when you do the testing, just to clarify, the patient isn't telling you all this. You're telling the patient, hey, what happened here? When did this happen? You can read basically from
Yeah.
your experience and the voltage and what this Mead test is showing. You can go through and say, tell me what happened here. Tell me what happened here. Tell me what happened there. You're not guessing. And then they give you feedback, and it's like, yeah, I had this, right?
Yeah, we basically were doing detective work together.
Yeah.
So I purposely don't look at anybody's chart before I do these tests, because I don't want to know what's going on with you, because I don't want it to sway anything. And so we just get answers, see what's on, see what's off. We use a machine for part of it, where we're actually measuring. You can see in the picture there, we're measuring, you know, with a machine, we're getting a number there. It's called the Mead score. But then we're also testing with a pendulum. And I know that sounds really crazy to some people, but if you think of physics, so
Polarity.
Yeah, polarity, right? So things are on, things are off. You have a right spin, you have a left spin. So on is right spin, off is left spin. I personally use the perfectly round acrylic pendulum because it doesn't have a frequency really. It does have a frequency, but not as strong of a frequency as, you know, like a crystal or something like that.
It's kind of neutral.
Yeah,
Fair.
It's pretty neutral.
Yeah.
It's like an empty vessel,
Yeah.
right? And so all I do is I'm forming a circuit, you know, usually with this hand, but I'm forming a circuit and I'm just saying, is it on? Is it off? I have no skin in the game. And after doing all these tests, it continues to blow my mind how accurate they are. But we do research together, you know, we figure out this detective work of, okay, so these are all the things that this circuit powers. So tell me, you know, do you have issues with any of these? Yes. Oh, wow. Yes, 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 yes. And it's just, okay, well, has anything ever happened with your molars? Oh, yeah, I got caps when I was 17. Boom. Okay, we know where that came from. Scars, you know, things like that can affect your circuits. So we basically find where you're leaking so we can patch you up.
Yeah. And the Mead test, going back to the 25 hertz that the cell needs to continually function, and 50 it needs to heal. The Mead test is trying to figure out where you are in comparison to those numbers, or that really the 25 number, correct?
Yeah. So that's where we're getting all these people that are at, you know, 10.9 or 8 or 6, or, you know, because we're calculating between the two.
Yeah. And in the process of healing, like we talked about, if the voltage of the cell is impaired because of different things that are getting in the way, number one, we've got to figure that out and remove those as best we can. But the reality is we also need to increase the voltage of the cell. But simultaneously, like you said, the oxygen and the alkalinity, that becomes important to the process as well, right?
Yep.
So it's collectively, that's the layering part, where it's not just finding the voltage, it's that. And early on in the process, in my opinion, because it's going to be hard, as Dr. Tennant stated, he said the cell needs to be, if I'm not mistaken, at 50
to heal,
to megahertz to heal.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So 25 to function, but 50 to heal. So that's a big gap if you're at 10.
Yeah. So if you're lacking, obviously this is an average of your whole body. So if you're low, then obviously you're leaking somewhere. We need to figure out where that is so we can patch you up so you can actually recharge and maintain the electrons. Because without the electrons, we are electrical beings. Without the electrons, nothing's really going to work very well.
Yeah. And if you're new to the center, or you've gone through early on in the process, we're really collecting a lot of data.
Yeah.
We're doing, you know, the Mead testing, and Molly's doing bioimmune and 3D body scan and live blood analysis. And, you know, there's so many different tests energetically as well that are being collected, and the data that is. And in the meantime, as we're collecting that data, we're doing some basic things until all the data comes back. We're oxygenating, alkalizing,
Mhm.
immune boosting, increasing voltage, trying to get the cellular nutrition right, all to try to, as quickly as we can, change the environment that's conducive for that cancer cell to thrive.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
So those are things right off the bat. And then as the process goes, I should say, and data comes back, we start refining the plan very specific to you, the individual, not general. No. Although the generalities are always going to be there. Oxygen alkalizing, immune boosting, charging, that's all always going to be there because they're staples. But what do we do as far as how much do we need to do? What kind of frequency do we need based on a lot of the testing that comes back? And then additionally, what else do we need to do based on the information that comes back? So it kind of goes from here and it gets more refined and detailed based on the data. And when I say data, the information from your testing that comes back, and then what we're going to do as a result of it. It gets more refined as the process goes. Yeah. So just giving you an idea, most of you, if you've been in, you know that. But if you're new to the cancer conversation, that's kind of how it works here. You know, we start here and we get a little bit more detailed as the tests come in. So go ahead.
So, you know, once we do the Mead test here, we do something called repolarization, and that's with Dr. Tennant's biomodulator biotransducer. So how does this work? Well, basically, what he's done is he basically figured out a way to change this electrical, essentially this electrical frequency emitting, you know, device into pulsed electromagnetic frequency and also scalar. And I'll explain what scalar is in just a moment.
Okay.
So
go ahead. Basically, polarity.
Yeah. So essentially, what this does is it flips all the switches back on. Right, you know, because we have all these circuits, right? If the circuit to your kitchen is off, your microwave's not going to work, right? Which we don't want a microwave.
No,
but
good
you know,
caveat.
but yeah, you know, but yeah, if your circuit's not on, nothing's going to work, right? So this is flipping all the circuits back on. We're going to patch the leaks, you know, as I like to refer to. We're going to look at the electromagnetic field, and if you've done one of these sessions, it can be a little bit emotional because, you know, we're going through and we're looking at your electromagnetic field and going, wow, okay, well, there's something along this circuit. You know, age 8 is coming up just because we're looking at it and there's a negative polarity there. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is when this happened, you know, and you're like, okay, let's correct that. So then you're using the scalar to actually correct that polarity back to positive, and sometimes, yeah, people get some really amazing releases. So scalar energy. So what is scalar? This is a term that is thrown around everywhere, and you know, it's the new hot thing, right? So scalar waves are essentially flat waves, and how you create those is basically you have let's say a positive polarity and a negative polarity aimed at each other. They meet, flat wave. That's scalar. So you'll see things out there like, you know, EE systems and all these other scalar devices, right? But those are kind of a blanket thing. I'm not really a big fan of some of them. But this one I am a fan of because it's very tuned in, you know, so not only is it scalar, but also it's specific frequencies that are actually going to help and benefit you. So it's really tailored.
The biomodulator?
Biomodulator, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's actually really tailored, you know, instead of just random scalar fields.
Yep.
So
okay.
Yeah. And also we do talk about going and seeing a biological dentist, because if you have caps, you know, if you have a root canal or
mercury fillings, right?
Yeah, you need to get all this corrected, because essentially, you know, if you got metal in there, you have essentially a battery in your mouth. Not very healthy.
Right. Right.
So.
And then what's that one down there? The root canal, one root canal?
Yeah. So one root canal shuts down 63% of your immune system, which is insane. But yeah, that's something that Dr. Tennant likes to talk about all the time. And in basically he overviewed, you know, 50 cases of cancer, you know, at their office, and 95% of them had a dental infection in the circuit that they had the cancer in.
Wow. So it wasn't just they had dental infection or root canal, it's in the circuit.
In the circuit that the cancer is occurring. Yeah. So very much a correlation there.
Yeah. Probably want to look at that.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. You've probably seen, some videos of this. Dr. Keneally does this every day, but this is the biomodulator with the hand and foot plates. So this is essentially the part that is giving you electrons and charging you back up. Like we said, you need 25 millivolts just to operate, 50 millivolts to heal. So as many electrons as we can get into your body, the better. So they have a daily protocol with this. We're doing some different things with patients here as well, but we do have these, for sale at the store and stuff like that for some people that they want to travel with them, they take them home. And ideally just doing this every day, I think is, something that I would do definitely.
And so a patient comes in when they get the testing, you then, or you or Natalie or Rebecca, whoever's doing the testing, can then prescribe a treatment protocol based on what's found. Is that accurate?
We don't prescribe.
Okay,
fair.
Yeah.
We do recommend, if it were me, like this is what I would do because this is how we've seen people's voltage shoot up. And we actually do have a couple of programs at the center that we've introduced. So they're called the charge and supercharge passes. And we made those specifically because that is how we've seen people's voltage go up the fastest. So that's kind of a strategic pairing between actually the biomodulator and then also the biocharger, which I'm going to talk about momentarily. But every single day, the patient's getting repolarized, so getting all the circuits flipped back on. They're getting recharged, in a different way and hitting the cells, and hitting the body in different ways, right? So you're getting that physical application of electrons with the biomodulator. And then you're also getting a different aspect of a charge with biocharger because it doesn't have essentially a ground, so you become the ground. And so that's why you're getting that energy into your body. So we use the two as a strategic pairing, and we've seen some really great results with that.
Yeah, basically when they're here and they're low, we're going to try to get you in the biomodulator or the biocharger as much as possible to create that better voltage. So the point, we can retest and show the changes. Yeah, so how is the retesting going?
It's going really good. Yeah, because we've seen, this is why we created these programs, was because in our initial months of doing this, we did some testing, and I was able to find that some people were even able to come up by as much as 80% in 2 weeks by doing this, by hitting it in different ways. So not saying everybody's going to do that, but I think that the biomodulator is the main tool, and the biocharger is a very good spice that really, really helps the entire process.
And you'll have some tidbits on if they're home, they don't have access, potentially there's other things, they could do to increase the voltage, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We'll get there, but yeah.
Well, just to go into that, we'll do that a little bit later, but yeah, there are some things that you can do at home. And I know we kind of talked about it earlier. There's some people that are like, oh, I can't do the biomodulator because I have a pacemaker, or stuff like that. Well, we can figure out other ways, to help you. So that's, don't let that be a complete and total deterrent of figuring out what your voltage is, This is just a kind of an image here showing you. So
that's
healthy cell membrane that we're talking about, unhealthy cell versus healthy cell. Unhealthy cell, the membrane is rigid, it's basically not allowing nutrients and oxygen in. It's not allowing waste out. Yeah. And you have a healthy cell with healthy membrane voltage, and the permeability, is increased, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. So I just want to show, the positive effects of microcurrent, which is what biomodulator is, as well as ScanR is, a microcurrent device, electroequiscope that we have here. That's a microcurrent device. Microcurrent is very different from TENS. Okay. So microcurrent is about, TENS is about 1,000 times stronger than microcurrent. Microcurrent is what our bodies actually run off of. So you'll see a lot of these devices don't go above 250 as far as their energy level. And that's because anything over that actually starts to decrease ATP production. Now, microcurrent has been shown to increase ATP production by about 500%.
Which is how your mitochondria produces energy.
Exactly. Right? It's all about energy for the cells, right? So protein synthesis up to 70%, increase amino acid, transport up to 40%. So incredibly beneficial. So not only is this just giving you electrons, but it's also beneficial in many other ways for the body.
Cellular health.
Yeah. So refuel. So tenant theory. So we want the building blocks to make healthy cells, right? And so Dr. Tennant lectures about these particular nutrients, and these things are needed to create healthy cells, right? So you need the energy to create the cell, but then you also have these building blocks that need to be there in order to actually make a new cell. You can't, as he talks about all the time, you can't build a house if all you've got is, tile and, a couple of window panes. You kind of need all the pieces, right? So you can see there's a few nutrients that he particularly talks about a lot there. B1, iodine, zinc and salt kind of being, some of them. But also he really talks about humic acid as well as fulvic acid, and the fact that the way that our world is kind of going with agriculture and all this stuff, the humic acid and the fulvic acid, it's not the same as it used to be. We're not getting the nutrients that we used to get. So incredibly important for good nutrition, because food is either an electron donor or an electron stealer. So let's go with electron donors, shall we? Oxygen, again, incredibly important. You talked about earlier, right? And the amount of oxygen available to the body, this is a very common misnomer. Okay. So you do the pulse ox, right? And, I measure your oxygen.
98%.
98%. Great. There you go. So that is looking at the oxygen that's circulating in the blood, right? But it's not showing you what's actually available to the body. There's a very particular voltage change that has to happen in order for that molecule of oxygen to break away to be able to actually be used for the body. So if you don't have that proper, voltage, that proper operation there, then you'll have oxygen floating around, but it's not going anywhere where it needs to go.
So it's the total oxygen is circulating in the blood, but it's not giving you what's actually getting into the cell being used. Okay.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And so that's something, that's why he talks a lot about like nitric oxide and things like that.
Okay. So getting the voltage better is naturally, if I have 98%, 99% pulse ox, right? The thing they put on your finger, and my voltage is really strong, and I have these nutrients and everything's copacetic.
You're good.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right. Fair. Okay.
Yeah. And then you'll be like Superman.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I need it.
All right. And then reprogram again. Sorry for the title. But yeah, so reprogram. So your physical and chemical body, that is all dictated by the frequency, right? If we don't have the correct information, then the right things aren't going to happen. And I know just personally with working with SkinR for so long, the body tends to get in these habits, right? And after 30 years of something, it thinks, oh, wow, this is normal now, right? And then you go in and this device, no, that's not correct. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Let's get back over here. Oh, wow. Okay. So let's reprogram the body too, right? And show it what it's supposed to be doing, because sometimes it just needs a little bit of a reminder. Your body is the miracle. Our bodies are incredibly resilient. However, there's so much going on now that we have to be proactive about this. And we really have to make sure that we're inputting the proper information, right? Not these other harmful frequencies around us. We need to put in the good stuff. And just kind of a breakdown here just to see how this all connects. So biochemicals. Well, biochemicals, made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, a few others that obviously came from stars and galaxies. We're all kind of a part of the same thing. But biochemicals are made of atoms. And atoms are made of, these tinier little particles like electrons, protons, neutrons, etc. But all those and the fundamental form are waves, and waves are information, right? So we see this whole little building block of what we are, and what is the very foundation is frequency. So if you haven't gotten why frequency is so important.
I think you did a good job of really, I do. I think you did a great job of of nailing that home.
Good.
So,
Thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
So
yeah, frequency is key to well-being. We have to have good information. We have to have the energy. We have to have the building blocks. Otherwise, all these other things with chemicals and with the physical body, right? These things aren't going to work as well.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Hard to heal.
yeah, exactly. So this is just kind of brief little, a thing about skin art therapy. This is my specialty, that I've talked about. It's created in the late 1970s by three scientists, Alexander Rubenko, Alexander Karasov, Yuri Gorfinkel. I was trained by Alexander Rubenko. Also his daughter actually comes in, she's a guest practitioner at this clinic. She's actually going to be here this week and next week as well. So, but yeah, like I said earlier, it mimics the nervous system. And essentially the action potential impulses, because those are what release all those little healing chemicals into the body, right? And so that's what this device does and why it's so effective for pain relief and for many other things. But essentially its whole goal is to put you as close back to homeostasis as possible. Also, like I said, we have the biocharger. So the biocharger is actually using a few different delivery methods, right? But how it works is basically they've programmed these particular recipes. So at our clinic, we have the option, you can do one recipe, you can do two recipes, you can do three recipes. Personally, I recommend doing three recipes. And the reason why is because, okay, if you're going to eat a sandwich, a gluten-free sandwich,
Good.
then you don't just want the lettuce or the meat, right? You want all of it, right? So if you do that stack of three, you're actually getting the entire method to our madness, let's just say, because that first little piece, that's going to help purify the body and release the things that need to be released, and also help it recover a little bit. But that second component, that's going to help, with the mitochondrial energy, and all these other things. And then we also help the immune system. So, it's all these different little building blocks. So just doing a little piece of it, okay, that's great. But I personally feel like there's a much bigger benefit when we do the stack of three, which is why we recommend it to a lot of people. But yeah, so biocharger uses light, voltage, frequencies, and harmonics to deliver these frequency recipes. So when you hear us talking about recipes, that's what we're talking about. When you're sitting in the room, there's going to be lots of flashing lights, sound. You'll see the gases light up in the tube, stuff like that. And actually on this subject, on the next cancer conversation, I believe, we're going to have a guest, Heather Hineker, who is like the queen of wellness technology. She's awesome. She's going to be doing a deep dive into CVAC, Beamer, and also biocharger. So you're not going to want to miss that, because those are some pretty amazing things. Yeah. So, like we talked about earlier, I don't know why we wrap around to that, but as you can see, frequency is incredibly important. We have some amazing ways to help correct it here at the clinic. And if you haven't already, I would definitely, if I were you, I would definitely add this to your regime of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's something that we put in to say somebody schedules as a new patient. Tracy, who does a lot of the processing along with Vicky of new patients, Tracy will actually schedule this ahead of time. Meaning, say you're coming in 2 weeks, she's going to get you on the books for mead testing. She's going to get live blood analysis. She's going to get Molly testing in there. She's going to get a lot of these frequency testings already on the books, because it's part of our protocol now.
Yeah,
it's almost I would say not optional to get the testing done. What you do with the testing is up to you. But at least we know we get the testing done, so we can start looking at this thing from the core foundational level, which is the cell.
Yeah.
Right. Everything above that, like we talked about, tying everything that I mentioned initially, the cell needs good voltage.
Yeah.
Proven. Needs oxygen. It needs to be less acidic, right? Which definitely comes from having better voltage and more oxygen. It needs good nutrient levels. It needs good mitochondria function, and it needs to have low stress to it, which comes from less inflammation, and then cleaning up a lot of this stuff over here, which are the causes. So again, you work cellularly, and then you work backwards, in my opinion, on what created that. Now you have a good plan going. So anyway, that's the tie-in. That's the whole full circle.
The whole full circle. Yep. And the basis of everything.
Yep, for sure. All right,
I
so
think the slideshow is good, right?
yeah, and let me just mention briefly. Sorry, got a
I think
little.
there's something blowing up because both of us. Sorry.
New patient. If anybody's interested in a new patient, Vicky on the cancer center side. If you have active cancer or you've had it recently, you're looking for preventing reoccurrence, which are two of the big demographics that we see here. The 949-867-6374 number, Cancer Center for Healing website's really good too. As far as the wellness side, that's the center side, 949-867-6419. You see it up there, cfnmedicine.com. That's for wellness, prevention. It's for human optimization. It's for, optimal function, all that. They both are, by the way, right? When I go through this with patients, I explain to them, look, the right testing, starving the cancer, killing the cancer, immune boosting, oxygenating, increasing voltage, nutrients of the cell, all important, and then fixing causes. So whether you're preventing, the only thing that we take out is the starve and kill phase, right? But all the other phases apply. If you have active cancer, we just have to figure out that phase as well. What are we going to do to kill the cancer, and what are we going to do to starve it, right? And then we do everything else that we talked about tonight. If you're preventing reoccurrence, same thing. We don't have to starve and kill it. We just work on everything else. So again, the big three demographics that we see are prevention, if you have active cancer, or active autoimmune or active disease and chronic disease in general, or you're trying to prevent the reoccurrence of it. It's all applicable, right? So the things that we have in the clinic hit all three of those demographics.
And prevention is key nowadays, especially with everything, just our environment, everything has changed. Prevention doesn't matter if you already have a chronic disease or cancer, any diagnosis. Everybody has to be preventing nowadays. And everybody.
As you learn here more and more, and I share my story with you all, I've had the ME testing. I've had live blood analysis. I've had Molly's testing. I've had all the blood and chemical testing and working through some protocols like Candida right now. I'm on a Candida protocol. So I'm taking the deeper dive as well because of what now we're exposed to, what I'm learning, and then just really what I'm learning, right? It's the deeper dive. So in order to give myself the best chance and be proactive from preventing a disease process, I have to do all the same things that you would have to do to heal from it. They're one and the same, right? So all those strategies we talked about really apply to everybody. I think this is a movement, my personal opinion, where we need to get this information out to the masses. Forget for a second about the clinic itself, right? This is getting the information out to the masses so people know that they have these options, they have these choices. And I think that's the key, a critical element from a purpose standpoint, that teaching, so people know that they have options, especially if they do have active cancer, that they have all these other options. I call it the other 19 chapters of a 20-chapter book to be able to implement and to have more control over this quote unquote uncontrollable disease, right? So anyway, you hear me say that a lot. How about we take some questions?
Sure.
Fair. All right. So, all right, this is an easy one. Have you started yet? Yeah, we got that. Good. We're good.
Yes, we have.
Obviously. All right. So go ahead. I'll let you repeat them so they all can hear.
Okay. So how does this process, basically, so how does it compare to the Rife
Beam
machine?
ray or
Rife? So a little different. So Rife in particular, I was just explaining this to somebody earlier. So Rife was around over, 100 years ago now. And he was using, so basically he sat there under, live microscope, right? And he turned a frequency dial until, that molecule, that virus or whatever he was looking at would start to oscillate. And then he would turn the intensity of it up so strong that it would break apart.
Just polarize it, yep.
The Rife machines today, completely different. They don't do that. That's not, yes, they have the same resonant frequencies, right? But they're not turning that, amplitude of the frequency up so high that it's destroying the cell. Yeah, and so a lot of them use like light tubes and stuff like that. Do I think that Rife machines are beneficial? Absolutely. Definitely much more beneficial than a cell phone. Definitely, for sure. They can be incredibly effective for many people. So if that's something that you have access to at home, yeah, by all means. The beam generator that we talk about, a lot of devices, and I think the big difference between like SkinR and biomodulator versus any of these other frequency technologies, a lot of them are sending info at the body, and they're not really having a two-way conversation. Biomodulator and SkinR are actually having a conversation back and forth with the body. So it's a much more dynamic process.
Okay, so horribly ill with CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, mold plus staph, looks like stealth infections for years, and have missed many of these presentations. Are they archived? I'll get to that in a second. And then you become very interested in cellular health, immune health, poisoning, etc., preventing dysfunction disorders, etc. Yeah, so one, Shep, are these archived? Yeah, so we'll get that information out to you for sure. And I think it's worth, taking your time going through those because, yeah, chronic fatigue really, at the end of the day, is your mitochondria has lost the ability to produce ATP. Now, what that happens with that is everything that happens above that. So voltage is probably way down for sure, right? Oxygen levels are probably way down, acidity is way up, nutrient levels are down. But really, and again, that's a strategy to work through that. But it's above that. You're going to have too many fueling the fire. So your inflammatory process is going to be very, very high. And that's going to create problems, everything from endocrine disorders like thyroid and adrenals, maybe hormone imbalance, blood sugar imbalances. We typically see that with chronic fatigue, but also it's kind of like if I had a virus, all right, if I had some cold virus or flu, I'm going to be tired because the inflammatory process disrupts my ability of the mitochondria to function. So there's probably multiple fuels igniting the fire, creating the inflammatory process, hurting the cell.
Oh, and also too, the fact that mold is present and kind of, thriving.
Yep.
That says that there's a low voltage, low oxygenated environment because we all have mold, fungus, parasites, all these things, but they don't activate until voltage drops and oxygen drops, and then they turn on and they start trying to turn you to dirt, and you're not ready yet. So yeah, voltage and oxygen for sure.
Big time. Yeah. So, okay, diagnosed triple negative breast cancer 2022. Stage 2, went through standard of care, chemosurgery, oral chemo. It's a lot of immunotherapy, no radiation. Focused on healing. Yep. Is there anything specific you'd recommend about triple negative to prevent reoccurrence? Any specific tumor markers or lab test? Anything else? Chemo resistance. Want to do everything I can. Yeah, good. So, yeah, you're going to the 4-pillar approach is going to be good for anybody, and then we just have to define it a little bit more, refine it based on individual labs. But the testing, everything from tumor markers to circulating tumor cells, which are the cells that can cleave off the original tumor, circulate around in the bloodstream. We want to test those. We want to make sure we look at everything from nagalase to PHI, D-dimers, cancer tumor markers, things like that, to get a better idea where you are now and take a deeper dive than just, hey, everything's good because the MRI or mammogram or things like that said it's good. There's a little bit more to that story. And then whatever is found, we certainly want to go in and heal that cell, and with everything that we talked about. And one of the biggies with triple negative is make sure we're figuring out what's causing it, what's driving that, right? So because with triple negative hormonally, right, we're not, it's triple negative means it's not sensitive to estrogen or progesterone or some of those hormones. So it could be created by other causes like toxins and chemicals and infections and things like that. Stress is a big factor in that process too. So you want to basically look at all of that when you're looking at preventing reoccurrence. And with triple negative, I tell patients, look, it is definitely a little more aggressive diagnosis than say, just maybe a lobular or ductal carcinoma of the breast, small things like that. They take it out, they do some radiation. Things are usually pretty good if they follow this plan. We just have to be more diligent with triple negative. That's all. You just want to stay on top of all these things more consistently with the testing, and then making sure we're doing the full gamut of these tests, of the treatments, and then spend the time, energy, and money if possible, I think, to invest in those. That would be I know it's a long answer, but that everything we talked about as far as the plan on here is what I would do for sure. Okay, let's see. Keep moving along. Excuse me. Energy enhancement system. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so EE systems, that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier. So am I a proponent for scalar? Yes. Me personally, am I a huge fan of EE? Not really. Here's the reason, is because basically, yeah, we're creating a scalar field, but it's not individually targeted. So for some people, it works incredibly well. Some people, they don't notice anything. So
is it not specific enough?
Yeah.
For the individual, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of like a blanket.
A blanket. Yeah, you did mention that early on, right? Okay, so melatonin gives me nightmares. What can I do about getting melatonin? Well, if it gives you nightmares, I'm not really sure about that one. But if we're taking, so melatonin is taken, it's a very good antioxidant. A lot of people take it from a sleep standpoint. So that gets into, if it's for sleep, we're having a problem with our circadian rhythm, in the sense that cortisol, when the sun goes down, should go down. It should naturally trigger melatonin to rise. If that's not happening, then we get into this process of circadian rhythm, the HP axis, they call it, your pituitary gland, how that is regulating your sleep-wake cycles. There's probably a little more to that, honestly. So, and then the milligrams, somebody asked about what's the daily dosage. That can fluctuate.
Yeah.
I always say it depends on the fire. Right? We have a big fire, we're going to put a lot of water on it, or a lot of milligrams on it, but there is no probably right or wrong dose there.
Well, and you might want to try too, just looking at your environment that you're sleeping in, because like I was talking about earlier, if you have a phone sitting on your nightstand and it's on, then that's going to shut off the melatonin cycle. So that right there.
And there are people that are much more sensitive to these EMFs than others. My personal opinion, it has to do with what actually is going on at the cellular level already, where their inflammation is, where their buffer is. So this immune system buffer I talk about with my patients, under normal circumstances, here's the immune threshold. If I've got good gut health, right? I've got good cellular energy. I've got very little inflammatory producers in my body. I can usually eat this and breathe this and tolerate EMFs and so forth. If I'm already overactive with an immune system because I have a lot of fuels to the fire, my buffer may only be right here. And then every little thing, something I eat, an EMFs, I can become more sensitive to, because I've lost my buffer, right? So the idea is, okay, we've got to cut down the EMF exposure, but we also have to start cleaning up the cellular environment and your immune system regulation by getting rid of the causes. Now, all of a sudden, I have a nice cushion. And the EMFs might not affect me as much. That's kind of I think theoretical, but I think that's right on, to be honest with you. So anyway, okay, so how much do scars from mastectomy impact body voltage?
Huge. So scars impede the flow of electrons. And so essentially, if you have a scar, let's say you have a strand of lights, that's essentially like snipping the lights, so boom, electrons are not flowing. So that's actually something that we work with the biomodulator, the biotransducer aspect of it, because there's a mode on there that actually changes the molecular makeup of the scar tissue so that it can actually have electrons flow through it again. And I've actually, just even doing SkinR, I kind of experimented a little bit, and I'd go over people's scars and there's no activity.
Right.
Use the transducer and then boom, activity is happening again. So you can definitely tell the difference.
The follow-up, dental cavitations, you asked, how often do you see improvement in the voltage testing once cavitations are repaired? Definitely, it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
But there could be other things that also are contributing.
Yeah.
So that's a hard question to ask. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, and also too, that's kind of like, okay, well, I patched the wire.
Yeah.
But did you turn the circuit back on? Probably not. And then also, did you charge it up? Probably not. A lot of people with chronic illness, they're not working out, and what do we do with our muscles is we're generating electrons. So the less active we are, the less electrons we're generating. A lot of people find that, they're super active and then something happens and that really slows down. And that's when they really start to see things kind of setting in, because they have all these leaks and all these holes happening, but they're working out so much and so active that they're kind of maintaining, right?
They're overcoming it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second that starts to drop, it's like, oh, okay, now we're starting to notice things because we're not keeping up.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, we've actually had a couple people like that.
Yeah. Okay. mRNA, magnetic resonance analyzer. You familiar with that at all?
That one I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
I will have to look into that and
get back to you, because I'm not familiar with it
Yeah.
either. So let's see. Rich says, let's see. Dr. Roney's using frequency instead of voltage. I think he means 50 millivolts to heal.
Not hertz.
Not hertz is
frequency,
okay. Yeah.
Millivolts is
Perfect. So millivolts for sure. Definitely millivolts. And then is it negative 50 or is it 50?
That's actually a common thing. People are like, wait, negative, negative this, or I see negative, so the negative in front of it, that just means that you're an electron donor, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So, negative 25 millivolts, that's good.
Okay.
If you're not an electron donor, you're not on this earth anymore. So you want to be an electron donor.
Good point. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. Okay. So how are you able to tell the age of the person when something happened?
So there's a couple things. So when we're doing the Mead test, we are talking through, we're doing detective work together, right? And you'll kind of see in these circuits, a lot of the chronic issues that they've had for a really, really long time. The thing that took out that circuit happened a long time ago. Oh, when I was a kid, XYZ happened, and then all these issues. But when we're working in the person's electromagnetic field, right? So we're not just this body. We have this whole informational body around us. And I kind of like to think of it like a tree trunk, right? So if you cut, a tree, you can see in the rings, oh, there was a fire, this many years ago, or there was this, there's a lot of information there. We're kind of the same way. So what we do is basically, I know it sounds, and if you know me, I am not a woo-woo person. I'm very much a physics person.
I am as well.
But so essentially we work in the electromagnetic field and we can actually see. So, let's say somebody's gallbladder circuit is out. I'm going to go in their field, in the line of that circuit, and I'm going to see, okay, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. Okay, there's a little bit of, movement there. Okay, 10, 11, 12. Ooh, okay, 12, 13. Nope, 12. Okay, if something happened about this age, let's go ahead and hit it with scalar. Let's get that flip back around. And without fail, when we're doing these, it freaks me out, in a very cool way, because we're really hitting things that aren't being looked at. And it's such a cool thing to, wow, we hit on this. And then they're like, oh yeah, when I was 12, my parent died, or, XYZ, something happened, or, oh, that's when I got in a huge accident. You can see things that happened in their field, and it's just like a tree trunk. So we hold information, not just here, but out here too.
So the next question, are you saying that having a root canal can cause cancer?
It's definitely one of the
kind
of commonalities.
So not probably as a isolated or soul. What they're saying is there's smoke, there's fire. So what Dr. Tennant, some of his research showed, is that root canals and infections correlate to areas of the body using the meridians and or
using his bioterminals. So the circuits that he figured out it correlated exactly.
So here's the idea. With oral cavity health nowadays, we definitely want to make sure we're getting rid of metals in the teeth, right? Like mercury. We definitely want to look at infections and then and cavitations, and with that, any of those cavitations or any of those metals, they are fuels to the fire. So they can create this chronic inflammatory response in the body that then can start to oxidize, oxidatively stress cells and create that damage that we talked about. So everything is on the board, if you will, as far as what we want to find and get rid of. And the oral cavity just keeps coming up more and more in the research. So I don't want to have a blanket statement and say, this definitely causes that, but we certainly don't want it there.
There's definitely a correlation there.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully that helps. Oxygenated at home. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So at home, things that people can do. Well, what do we do every single day is we walk around insulated from the earth. We have shoes that are completely blocking us from the earth's electromagnetic field. So we naturally draw electrons from the earth. And so one of the best and easiest things that you can do is go outside barefoot, and you can go on, unsealed concrete. You can go on, grass, on dirt, sand, not asphalt, because that does not conduct, but go outside. Earth. Earth, ground, get those electrons. Also, you get a lot from just being in nature, I mean, just being out in the sun, is incredibly beneficial to you. Eating good foods. Foods are either an electron stealer or an electron donor. You want to be eating the electron donors because we already have so many things that are robbing us of electrons. So if you are eating things that it's supposed to be fuel for you, that's actually stealing energy from you, well, what benefit is that? Right.
And exercise, right?
Yeah.
Key.
Exercise. Keeping moving, being active. And then also it's funny, but actually pets are an incredible thing. Dr. Tennant talks about how his original biomodulators were his two dogs that actually were curled up on his bioterminal points when he was chronically ill and stuck in bed. These two dogs would actually just lay on these two spots on him all the time. And later he found, oh my gosh, those were the two circuits that were out, and they were charging him up. So, yeah.
All right. So let's see. Affordable one at home. And the other one was, can you purchase a biomodulator at home? So what can you do for home use if you wanted to?
Yeah. So definitely if it is within your wheelhouse, I think every human on this planet could benefit from owning a biomodulator at home. If you do want, if you have questions on that, feel free to call our store. They can help you out with that. And also, the Tennant Institute, they've been incredibly supportive in everything that we do. We work together. But yeah, call the store. They can help you out. And then also, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was just last one, because I know we're running over. Is it okay to use that at home if the cancer's active? And is there any danger in correcting your voltage too quickly, die off, other side effects?
I mean, some people, it takes so long for you to drain that it really does not come out. It's not like you're going to go from, 10 millivolts to 50,
right?
That. That's not how it works.
It's a slow process.
Yeah, it's a process. And I haven't heard really a lot about Herxheimer reactions or anything like that with this methodology. I feel like that can kind of happen with anything if you use it wrong, so maybe if somebody's sitting here doing this all day, every day, and using not as directed, maybe, but I haven't heard about any Herxheimer reactions with this because, it's a very natural thing for our body. So.
All right, gang. I know it's 22 after, so we're gonna cut it. And as always, your questions that weren't answered, we will answer them and get them to you for sure. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Danielle for being here. I thought that was an excellent presentation. I thought that at the end of the day, sometimes I think, I don't know if I'll retain or the audience will retain all that, but what you do is you leave going, oh, that was important. Yeah. Charging your cells and increasing voltage is extremely important. So anyway, that's definitely what I got out. I think I get a little the science as well, but if you didn't, just know, hey, charging the cell, increasing the voltage, incredibly important. You now know the ways that you could do that. So I think, and the importance thereof. So anyway, have a great week, y'all. We'll see you in a couple weeks. And if you need anything, we went over the numbers, we went over the websites. Definitely reach out if we can help you in any way. Okay. Have a great one.
Bye, guys.